It all started as a game, and I knew what I was doing was wrong. On the other hand, I was struck by the fact that Mr. Harry was 80 years old, white, and had such masculinity. Destiny, a young woman of 22, was fascinated by Mr. Harry's imposing presence. His silver hair and elegant demeanor contrasted with my dark skin and youth. In the summer, I landed a job at a retirement home as an assistant. I had the night shift. I loved the work. It wasn't tiring, the pay was good, and I enjoyed listening to the stories of the women and men, ranging from 70 to 95 years old. My first few weeks were uneventful, just getting used to the routine of checking on the residents, giving them nighttime medications, and occasionally helping someone to the bathroom. One of the residents, Ms. Helena, warned me about Mr. Harry, telling me that he was quite annoying to the female assistants and that I should teach him a lesson. At first, everything seemed normal with Mr. Harry, but as the days went by, I started to notice certain things, like the way Mr. Harry's eyes would linger on my butt or bust when I bent over to adjust his pillows, or how he would knock things over to get me to bend over. Plus, he would constantly give me compliments and nicknames like Sweet Brownie, Ebony Queen, etc. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was part of the job, though I did like a bit of attention, and Mr. Harry was very funny and seemed harmless. One night while I was making my rounds, I heard strange noises coming from Mr. Harry's room. Curious, I looked inside, and what I saw stuck in my head. When I entered Mr. Harry's room, although it was somewhat dark, I could see that he was performing a private act. I was quite shocked by what I saw. Mr. Harry stared at me as he finished his business. His gaze was intense. Without saying anything, I left the room, thinking that perhaps it was just my imagination. The next day, Dirty Harry, as I call him now, asked me if I had seen what he was doing the night before. I replied, "I think it was a worm thing, huh?" He laughed and said, "I'm sure you've never had real white chocolate like mine." I replied, "I prefer dark chocolate." His laughter continued as he insisted I give him my cell phone number so he could send me memes. Reluctantly, I wrote down his phone number in my notebook. The next day, upon checking my phone, I had several messages from Mr. Harry. Mr. Harry was not sending me memes, but videos of 70-year-old men with 20-year-old women from a pay site. At first, I found it shocking, but soon, despite not fully understanding why, these videos began to intrigue me greatly. It completely changed my perspective on older men. I couldn't get the videos out of my head, and during my shifts, I began to imagine the residents in situations like the one in the videos. Dirty Harry continued his antics without any kind of control. One night, 3 weeks before I finished work, he was waiting for me in his room, dressed only in boxers with hearts on them. "I put them on you," he said, laughing. Without thinking much about the possible consequences, I told him, "If you stop bothering me and leave me alone for 3 weeks straight during my shifts, on the last day of my shift, I will give you a bra." I regretted saying it as soon as the words were out of my mouth. But there was no turning back now. I had made a deal with this 80-year-old man that made my heart race in ways I still didn't fully understand. When our eyes met in an intense gaze, I felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through my body as his intense gaze locked on mine. He replied with a smirk, "And if I don't?" With my heart racing, I replied, "I'll switch shifts with one of the ladies." Quickly, Mr. Harry said, "Deal. But you're giving me permission to take it off myself." A deep blush crept up my neck at the thought, and I quickly replied, "You can do that, but no touching me." He chuckled and said, "No more Dirty Harry for you. From now on, I'm Gentleman Harry. Let's see if you keep your end of this deal." Over the next 3 weeks, Mr. Harry kept his word, almost too much so. We chatted amicably during my visits, and he even started to feel like a friend instead of a potential troublemaker. But despite the pleasant interactions, I couldn't shake off the lingering images from those explicit videos he'd sent me and the unforgettable sight of his impressive endowment. My last day at work had arrived. I was feeling nervous, even dizzy with anxiety. I put on some pink lingerie that was both lovely, but my mind was also filled with doubt. What am I doing? How can he make this deal? What if someone found out about our deal? As 8:45 p.m. approached, the nurse on duty handed me Mr. Harry's medication, and I walked down the hall to his room, my legs shaking. He was waiting for me in the dimly lit space, sitting on the couch in a new pair of silk pajamas that hugged his aging figure in all the right places. His eyes locked with mine as I entered, and a slow smile spread across his face. Mr. Harry's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he spoke. "I've been waiting for this moment all day, Destiny." My heart raced and butterflies danced in my stomach at his words. He took a step closer to me, his voice low and husky. "Do you really want me to?" I nodded quickly, not trusting myself to speak as my nerves threatened to overwhelm me. "Let's get on with it then," I managed to stammer out. "We shouldn't take too long. We don't want anyone to find us like this." In one swift movement, I pulled off my assistant uniform jacket and let it fall to the floor. The fabric of my pink lace bra appeared next as I reached behind me to unbutton it. It slid free from my shoulders and joined the growing pile of clothing at our feet. Harry's eyes drank in every inch of exposed skin hungrily as he stepped forward once more. Mr. Harry gathered my clothes with agonizing slowness, as if he were savoring every second of our encounter. Blushing furiously, I whispered, "Don't have a heart attack." He was true to his word and didn't try to touch me. In an instant, he was holding my lace underwear like a prized artifact. "I'd give anything to be 25 again," he murmured huskily. I began to dress. "So fast?" His question hung in the air as I fumbled for my uniform. He looked at me intently. "That day you came in, did you like what you saw?" I shook my head vehemently, saying I saw nothing. He chuckled. "I know you saw me. The question is, did you like it?" His words struck a chord deep within me, igniting a fire that had been simmering just beneath the surface. As I finished buttoning up my uniform, Mr. Harry's eyes never left mine, his gaze burning with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "You're right. I liked what I saw," feeling vulnerable. Without a second thought, I stepped forward. We were face to face, and I slid my hand in, and his heat was intense. Our bodies were separated by thin layers of clothing, which in a second ended up on the floor. "I want you to look at me," he told me. I couldn't say a word as I looked down. He looked at me with a mischievous glint in his eyes and said, "Scared? And I'm getting smaller every year." He laughed. Then his expression turned serious. Our bodies were almost touching as I looked into his eyes. "If I have a heart attack, tell them you found me like this," he joked. His hands were expert, pushing all the right buttons. It was hard to believe this man was 75 years old. His touch was skilled and experienced. It seemed like he was 20 years younger at one point. His fingers danced, leaving trails of heat in their wake. "Young people these days are so hasty," he murmured, his breath hot against my ear as he gently tugged on the lobe. I shivered at the sensation. "You're a beautiful thing, Destiny," he growled softly. The contrast in our skin was evident. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. The quiet hum of the heater filled the silence, broken only by the occasional creak of a door down the hall. It was late, and I knew we had to be careful, not too loud, not too obvious. The last thing we needed was to wake someone or, worse, get caught. I sat on the edge of his bed, my hand brushing against his. His touch was warm, steady, a comfort in the stillness of the night. When our eyes met, it felt like the rest of the world disappeared, and for a moment, I forgot where we were. "You know we have to be quiet," I whispered, leaning closer, my lips curving into a soft smile. He nodded, his voice barely audible. "I know. I don't want anyone to find us." I couldn't help but smile at the seriousness in his tone, biting back a laugh as I rested my forehead against his. The moment felt forbidden, exciting. When his lips met mine, it was tender, deliberate, as though he were afraid the moment would shatter if he moved too quickly. The bed creaked softly as he shifted, and I froze, suppressing a giggle as my heart pounded in my chest. We both paused, listening intently for any sounds in the hallway. When nothing came, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and we shared a muffled laugh, the kind only we could understand. Every touch felt more meaningful in the quiet of the room. His hand moved gently over mine, and I could feel the unspoken urgency between us, as if the night were our only chance. Time seemed to move differently, each second stretching out as we savored every stolen moment. "You have no idea how wonderful this feels," he crooned, squeezing me. "You don't either," I smiled, meeting his delighted gaze. Harry growled like an animal. Then he laid down and nuzzled my face. "Can I give you a kiss on the cheek?" he sighed huskily. "Are you asking for a kiss on the cheek after what you just did?" I chuckled. "Of course you can," I replied. I told him I had to go. Harry understood. People would be knocking on the door soon if she didn't leave her room. I got out of bed, wiped my legs, and quickly put on my uniform. "Aren't you forgetting something?" he chuckled, pointing at my scattered clothes. "No," I smiled, picking them up from the floor. "Keep them safe and out of sight. They're yours now." I tossed them to him. "Oh, my ebony queen," he squirmed, catching them and hiding them under his pillow. "You don't feel like continuing, do you?" I really meant it. "I think you've had enough, haven't you?" "Yeah, I guess so." It was better than a kick in the teeth. He winked at me. "You don't have many teeth," I teased. "You're a cheeky one." He laughed loudly. "Good night and goodbye, Harry." "Take care," I said sincerely. "You too, Destiny. Good luck with the rest of your life. Hopefully we'll see each other next summer. Now get out of here quickly, because Mistress Helena is coming to visit me today." I smiled and left the room, only to find Mistress Helena waiting outside. With a mischievous grin, she looked at me and said, "I hope you left me something." Her words left me completely speechless. Without answering, I walked away, my mind spinning with thoughts of how the summer was shaping up to be much more interesting than I had imagined.